What's the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. Clint, how are you?
I'm excellent.
You and I do something, and I don't think that you're aware that it's not a common thing for you and I to do. However, it's something that I think really enriches our relationship and our marriage. And oh my gosh, I can't believe that this week we'll have been married for 17 years. That's pretty wild. Mm-hmm. But maybe this is a part of it. So I wanted to talk about that today. And that is the acts of service that you and I contribute towards one another. And most importantly, doing it in a very deliberate way that makes our work days a lot easier.
Yeah, it's one of those things for us that we share extra duties, and we're not doing it for any type of reward. We're not doing it for anything. Like, we just want to help. We genuinely want to help one another.
Yeah, so let's break it down. And I think that you and I do a lot more for one another than we sometimes do for ourselves. And that's kind of like an element of the balance within our marriage, I think. And so it could be something as simple as, I'm trying to think of things that I've randomly discussed with people in conversation, and then they're kind of shocked, like, you do that. And one of them is packing your lunch, for example, or making food to prepare for your lunch.
Yeah, and that takes that pressure, and it's not anything overly complicated. It's something that I could easily do myself, but I appreciate it so much, and it takes that pressure off of me, so I don't even have to worry about it. And it's finding those little acts of service that, whether it's a small act or a large act, like it makes our lives easier, and it shows the cohesiveness between us to be able to do something without the other asking.
Another thing too is you and I learned our strengths individually long before we were even married. And so another example is like one of the biggest stressors for me lately has been the state of California. They're using these recent LA fires as an excuse to make getting fire insurance even more difficult. And mind you, our premium went up to $22,000 2 years ago. And we got so screwed when that happened. And we couldn't find nobody would insure us. And then finally, after me calling about, 90, and that's not an exaggeration, different agents to try to help me find a policy, I did. And I was so relieved 1 year ago. And then I get a letter from, and this is a guy I talked to who owned he's a broker, like he owned the agency, and so supportive of law enforcement. And I was just so thankful. Then I get a letter a year later saying that we're getting a non-renewal for our policies, and we don't have one, we have two houses, so it's like double the headache. And so one of my strong suits is the navigating of this type of thing, right? Because it's really complex when you're dealing with something like 90 agents not wanting to repeat the work and like all of this stuff, and getting pictures and filling out applications that have all of your property information on two houses and everything. And so I had to do this again because we got the non-renewal that was effective on 3/1. And so every single company, one after another, nobody would insure us. And now they're using the whole LA fire as an excuse as to the reason why. And it's terrible, you guys. As you listen to this, if you don't live in California, good riddance to you, because in addition to this, we also have the AB 1333 that California is trying to pass, where they want to make self-defense illegal. You heard that right. They are trying to do everything they can to protect criminals. It's like, I can't fathom like what comes next with them, but then they always surprise me somehow. And so in California, with our fire insurance situation, it's impossible now. And so what they want to do is they're trying to turn this state into a very communist state. And now we have the California Fire Plan, which has been around for, I think, for over almost 50 years now. And the California Fire Plan was supposed to be something that you could use on a temporary basis in order to insure your home when you couldn't get insurance. Let's say you're in limbo, like you get California Fire Plan and it's quick and like, okay, now you have a Band-Aid until you can get something else. Because if you have a mortgage, you have to have fire insurance. Well, now California is basically requiring, they're pushing all the insurances out. They're making everybody get the California Fair Plan. Then you have to get an additional wraparound plan that covers, injury, burglary, all of those things. And so I'm sharing all of this with you because it's very stressful, very, very stressful to be able to get all of that approval. So much to the extent that, we recorded another episode about discrimination against law enforcement, and I'm fairly certain that happened to Clint and I when we tried to get a wraparound plan because they kept asking us to repeat our behavior when it comes to taking pictures of certain things, and that's another story in and of itself. But one of my strong suits is like handling all of that, and it's quite different for you, Clint, because I am the like no bullshit kind of like straight talker. Like I'm not going to put up with anything. Like you do what I need you to do because that's your job. And then, you're very forgiving and very, very different in that regard. So I'm sharing that because it's such a hassle, but that's my strong suit, is to be able to deal with that kind of overwhelm in a way that is very direct, that I'm still going to get what I need out of it in the end, which we did. I don't know if, paying a whole whopping $14,000 a year for one property is a good thing. However, I'm sharing that because that's one of my strong suits. And that's something that Clint, you and I know, like paying the bills and, doing our taxes and all of that stuff is my strong suit. And so I take all of that stress off of you. You don't know anything about any of that ever. You show up to the tax appointment and you sign the papers, and, you didn't sign anything for our insurance. Like I take care of all of that because I don't want you to have to do any of that.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, like, I know that's not my strong suit. I mean, if I had to sit down and buckle down to do it, could I do it? Yeah, but I wouldn't be able to be near as effective or strong with doing that, to where we need to rely on one another's strong suits and weaknesses and being able to support one another. And that's what creates that cohesive relationship. And that's how we support one another in doing that. And now, if there was something to, when it comes to those instances where, you're taking on so much and you need help with it, and that's where it's having those conversations saying, okay, well, I'm going to step in and do XYZ and see how I can support, see how I can assist in any way when it comes to those instances.
Yeah, and this year with you working graveyard, you have done such a great job at stepping up and then doing additional things because you are off more than you work. Mm-hmm. And so things like helping with the laundry and the dishes and like cleaning around the house and all of these things that I really appreciate, because I'm pushing like bare minimum 7 days a week, 16-hour days right now. And it's so helpful for me that you do things like that. And another example is, if I'm the one that will cook, I usually do like a big meal and then you'll eat that throughout the work week. And that would also require me to know what ingredients we need for that. So like I do all of that grocery shopping, but then, it's not like I am totalitarian over it. Like I asked you yesterday, for example, like, is there something special that you would like me to make for this week? And then you told me, and then I go on and I order all of our groceries. And, so there are a lot of things that you and I just like, we what is that, ebb and flow?
Yeah.
Trying to think of what that. And we do a really great job at that dance of life, so to speak.
Yeah, and I have to say this, I truly appreciate anything and everything that you always do for me to help support me, and especially with working the weird hours that I do. It's hard because I work all night. Like a day like on Sundays, like I'm up from 4 a.m. until 9 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning, and it's being able to support one another and help one another in those instances, to be able to step up and take that workload off each other, not to overcomplicate it, not me come home and say, hey, so did you pay our bills this week? Did you do XYZ?
I'd be like, why are you asking me that?
Yeah, it would be very out of character and bizarre.
Do you even know what bills you have?
No. but it's one of those situations to where it's an unspoken agreement that we have, that we share, to where you don't come to me and say, hey, did you do the dishes today? Or did you do our laundry this week? No,
you and I aren't like that at all. And
no.
I think that's why we're not argumentative towards one another. Like if something needs to be done, if it's not done, I know that's because you didn't have the time to do it, or you didn't see it, or I didn't have the time to do it, or didn't see it. And then you and I both pick up the slack. Like it's just That's how a household should run. It should be fluid. It shouldn't be, you and I are not the child of one another, and so you shouldn't have some kind of, like a chore list for one another.
Yeah, it should just come naturally. And that's where it comes into that cohesiveness between you and your partner, and being able to step up and take on and share that workload to where it's not an expectation. It's just you're doing it because out of love, out of caring for the other.
Yeah. And something that I've had to learn this year is doing my best to make sure that I'm creating a very quiet and calm environment for you while you're sleeping during the day. And that could be, we have a little dog deterrent remote control that you press the button and the dogs will stop barking. So we have another one. We have 2 of them. And so I brought one upstairs because it has like a 30 feet range on it. Might be 30 meters. And you press the button and then the dogs will stop barking. And so sometimes the dogs bark for no reason. So I have that remote control up here and making sure that I'm trying to close the door downstairs if you forgot to close it so the dogs don't go in and out, or squeezing my dog when they want to bark sometimes so that they'll stop, and so I think it's all about teamwork and then finding what works best for you. But acts of service like this in a relationship just make life a lot easier, and I think make a marriage work a lot better. I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below, and as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.